Okay, welcome back. It is actually July 4 of 2015, and we're going to finish up the volume 3 of the Psychology from an Empirical Standpoint. This is the final lesson on epistemology in that work. It's going to deal with the concept of teliosis, and you might wonder why he uses the concept of teliosis rather than teleology, but it's because for Brentano it's always about the psychognostic model, not a ontology. It's always about a psychognosy, so he discusses teliosis from a psychological point of view rather than teleology from an ontological point of view. So it is a discussion of teliosis in his final lesson. It runs from page 78 to the end of the book, which is page 89. It's a very brief third volume, but it has a very extensive note section at the end, which is important to read because he gives a lot of clarification in his notes. So if you do obtain the volume, you want to make sure to give a lot of attention to the note section at the latter portion of the book. We'll begin with the intuitive states of transition. Teliosis is the process of coming into being. It includes the regeneration which can occur. That which passes away always regenerates itself. Teliosis is a hidden reality behind the particular intuitive state of transition which appears to us in external reality. But we are only immediately aware of the intuitive time. Only intuitive time first becomes an awareness for us. Sensory intuition only shows local temporal difference. The second moment is the acquisition of boundary of a temporal continuum. And here he says that interperception can grasp temporal continuum as a boundary for experience within that mode of presentation. Remember, in the last lesson we discussed the mode of presentation as the realm of spirit, where the secondary object is presented and we confront it with intelligible experience. So make sure you keep that last lesson at the forefront of your mind when we go through this eschatology. So we can acquire a boundary for experience as a temporal continuum within the mode of presentation, the realm of spirit. But this still falls short of grasping the modality of teliosis. We simply gain an awareness that the past has length. The present appears as the modality of the recto whole, and the past appears as the modality of the obliquo elements of the whole. But here's what we do acquire in the second moment, very important in the internal perception of temporal continuum: relational association. We do form relational association in this moment between our significations that we have acquired. So we do acquire, we do practice the relational association of significations. This brings us to the third and primary moment being discussed here of teleosis as the coming into being, and he couples that with axiomatic expansion, which we've already discussed. Axiom number 1, objects of thought are universal. Axiom 2, we can internally posit universal relative concepts. Like what? Well, number 3, as universal relative concepts, we posit spatial distance of interconnectivity between the significations. That very first moment of the emergence of a model. Axiom 3, in any discussion of time, we are dealing with relations. And Axiom 4, all temporal determination relates to the present. Everything is related to the present. Now, here we get involved with psychical presentation. We group the teleosis as a presentations of temporal relations. So now we're going to work on the temporal interrelatedness between our significations. We posit the presentation of temporal relation between significations. But it's relative temporal determination, says Brentano, never absolute. It's always relative temporal determination. To reach the absolute, we again turn to cyclical presentation. There is a presentation at the cyclical level of temporal direction as teliosis. So not just interrelatedness, but there is a presentation of temporal direction as teliosis. That creates the encounter with the absolute for the very first time. This cyclical presentation of temporal direction. So axiom 5, therefore, presentation offers us absolute temporal differences that are specifically determined in sensate reality. Now, for teleosis to become conceptual for the discerning self, it must always be posited as a coincidental with significations. It must always be coincidental with significations. Therefore, we posit a temporal relational coincidence to be inscribed over the significations that we hold in mechanical memory. We posit a temporal relational coincidence. And this inscribing of the temporal relational coincidence over the lexical self-existing signs creates the eschatological sign model. Final axiom: the inherently true is always the later and the earlier of objective presentation. It's always an eschatological trajectory for Brentano. The inherently true is always eschatological trajectory. This corresponds with Aristotle's concept of Energia-Enteles, and of course we know that Brentano is situated dead center in Aristotle. Energia equals the being at work of being, that coming into being, at work in actuality, and Enteles is the activity of the ordering toward an end, the teleology of ordering, or he calls it teliosis from a psychognostic standpoint, but it's the psychognostic ordering is the Enteles. So it corresponds with Aristotle's Energia-Enteles, the being at work of coming into being of a teliosis ordering toward an eschatological end. And it gives us that final moment for Brentano's epistemology, because we got a great look at his realm of spirit in the last lesson, but within this realm of spirit we close by saying that temporal determination was revealed within that cyclical realm of spirit, and that within that realm we can take up temporal continuum, and then by discerning that presentation of directional sense, of an actual presentation of directional sense, we can move on to the very first appearance of the absolute. The temporal direction as a teleosis makes its appearance in that cyclical realm of the modality of presentation, the realm of spirit. And that's our first confrontation or encounter with the absolute. That leads us toward positing that coincidence with our significations of a temporal relational coincidence between significations. And we form that eschatological sign model, the Energia-Enteles of Aristotle, the coming to be of being as a teleosis ordering toward an end. And so it's really a great final lesson that kind of builds on the last lesson. So like I said, you have to really keep that last lesson in mind, that great summary he gave us. But you couple that great summary that Brentano gave us in the last lesson with this true eschatology as a teleosis, psychognostic teleosis, not a metaphysic, not an ontology, but a psychognostic teleosis. Very important distinction for Brentano. And that will wrap up Volume 3 of his Psychology from an Empirical Standpoint. This is Book 3. And that will wrap up through page 89. It was a very brief text, but it had a very large volume of notes at the conclusion of the book. So I do recommend that you get a copy if you can. I know there are probably limited copies available, but Volume 3 was not included in the volume on empirical standpoint. You only got Volume 1 and 2 in English, so you need to pick up Volume 3 separately. And that'll wrap up our concluding lesson up through page 89.